the Anglo-Zanzibar War. It is remembered today as the shortest war in recorded history, and it lasted less time than most people spend deciding what to eat for lunch. The year was 1896, and the island of Zanzibar had been operating under British control for some time, governed by a sultan handpicked by the empire, cooperative, manageable, and entirely aware of who was really in charge. That arrangement held together until the sitting sultan died suddenly, poisoned under circumstances that were never fully resolved. Into the vacuum stepped his cousin, Khalid bin Bargash, a man who had no intention of playing the role the British had scripted for the position. He despised British authority, rejected their directives, and moved his followers into the royal palace to consolidate power before anyone could stop him. The British response was immediate and direct. Either leave the palace and abandon the claim or face the Royal Navy. Khalid chose to stay. He gathered roughly 3,000 supporters inside the palace grounds, positioned whatever artillery he could find, and prepared to hold his ground. The British arrived with 5 warships. Khalid's naval force consisted of 1 yacht. On the morning of August 27, 1896, at precisely 9:02 a.m., British ships opened fire. By 9:40 a.m., it was over. 38 minutes of bombardment reduced the palace defenses to rubble, sank the yacht, and ended Khalid's ambitions entirely. He fled through the German consulate and spent years in exile. A new sultan was installed by afternoon. The British had their colony back before lunch. The Great Emu War. In 1932, the Australian government went to war. Not against another nation, not against an armed enemy, but against birds. Large, fast, deeply uncooperative birds, and the birds won. After World War I, the Australian government had granted parcels of land in Western Australia to returning veterans, a gesture meant to reward service with a productive future. What nobody anticipated was that a drought would simultaneously drive tens of thousands of emus inland directly into those same farming regions. Emus stand around 6 feet tall, move quickly, and operate with a herd instinct that makes them extraordinarily difficult to manage in large numbers. When they arrived at the farmland in Campion, they ate crops, trampled fields, and broke through fences, the gaps from which then allowed rabbits and other pests to pour in and finish whatever the emus had left behind. The farmers appealed to the government, and the government sent Major G.P.W. Meredith and 2 soldiers armed with 2 Lewis guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The campaign began on November 2nd, 1932. The first encounter involved a group of emus that scattered before Meredith's men could get into effective range. A second attempt near a dam drew in nearly 1,000 birds, but the guns jammed after killing only 12 of them, and the rest dispersed across the landscape. A third strategy involved mounting a gun on a moving truck to chase the emus down, abandoned quickly when the birds outpaced the vehicle on rough terrain while remaining nearly impossible to hit. Meredith later noted to the press that the emus seemed to absorb gunfire with an almost mechanical indifference, regrouping after each assault as though nothing had happened. The newspapers were merciless. An ornithologist remarked that if the emus had a military division, they would be hard-pressed to find a more capable force. Meredith was recalled, sent back, and defeated again. On average, his team expended 10 rounds of ammunition per emu killed. The crisis was not resolved by firepower. It was resolved by building a better fence. Sometimes the answer was that simple all along: the War of the Golden Stool. There are moments in colonial history where you read what a colonial administrator actually said or did and struggle to believe anyone could have been that spectacularly unaware. Frederick Hodgson managed to start a war with a chair. By 1900, the British had formally annexed the Ashanti Kingdom in what is now Ghana, bringing the region under colonial administration and installing officials to manage the transition. Hodgson was one such official, dispatched to maintain order and represent imperial authority in the region. He arrived, gathered the Ashanti people for an address, and promptly demanded to be brought the golden stool, the most sacred object in Ashanti culture. The stool was not simply a ceremonial artifact. According to Ashanti tradition, it had descended from the heavens and contained within it the collective soul of the Ashanti people, the living, the dead, and those not yet born. No person, including the Ashanti king himself, was permitted to sit upon it. It was never placed on the ground. It was never treated as furniture. Hodgson knew none of this or didn't care, and announced that he intended to sit on it as a symbol of British authority before sending it to London as a trophy for the Queen. The Ashanti response was not verbal. They went home, and within days, Ashanti warriors had surrounded the British garrison. The siege lasted months. Thousands died on both sides before British reinforcements arrived, and the fighting finally ended. Hodgson was evacuated. The golden stool was never found. For the next 20 years, British officials continued searching for it across the region, turning up nothing. Then, in 1921, a group of African road workers stumbled upon it by accident and stripped several of its golden ornaments. The Ashanti sentenced the workers to death. The British intervened and had them exiled instead. The stool was returned to the Ashanti intact enough, and it remains a protected national symbol in Ghana to this day. Hodgson retired quietly and presumably never understood what he had done. The Jenkins Ear War. Few conflicts have ever been named after a body part, which alone puts this one in rare company. The war between Britain and Spain that broke out in 1739 owed its popular name to a Welsh sea captain named Robert Jenkins, who appeared before the British Parliament, holding a small glass jar containing what he claimed was his own severed ear. Jenkins told Parliament that 7 years earlier, Spanish Coast Guards had boarded his ship in the Caribbean, tied him to a mast, sliced off his ear with a cutlass, and told him to take it to his king. He had kept the ear preserved ever since, waiting for the right moment to produce it. That moment turned out to be 1738, when Anglo-Spanish tensions over trade rights and smuggling accusations in the Caribbean had already been building for years. Jenkins and his jar simply provided a story the British public could rally around. Parliament authorized war shortly after. The conflict that followed lasted nearly a decade, eventually merging into the broader War of the Austrian Succession and drawing in most of the major European powers. Thousands died across multiple continents and ocean theaters. Trade routes were disrupted, colonial territories changed hands, all of it traceable, at least in the public imagination, to one man, one jar, and one ear that may or may not have actually been his. Historians have never been entirely certain the account was fully accurate. Jenkins told a compelling story at precisely the right moment, and the machinery of the empire did the rest. The Pastry War. In 1838, France went to war with Mexico over a bakery. A French pastry chef named Raymond Tell, operating a shop outside Mexico City, filed a complaint with the French government claiming that Mexican army officers had broken into his establishment and eaten his pastries without paying. He valued the damages at 60,000 pesos, a figure so disproportionate to the original grievance that it suggested the number had been inflated to include years of accumulated complaints. France used the claim alongside other outstanding debts owed to French citizens by the Mexican government to demand 600,000 pesos in reparations. Mexico refused. France responded by deploying a naval fleet to the Gulf of Mexico and blockading the port of Veracruz. After months of failed negotiations, French forces bombarded the San Juan de Ulua fortress and occupied the port city. Mexico declared war. The fighting lasted several months, drew in a young military officer named Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, who lost his leg to French cannon fire and later had the limb buried with full military honors, and ultimately ended with Mexico agreeing to pay the demanded reparations. France withdrew. The pastry chef received nothing on record. Whether Raymond Tell ever got his 60,000 pesos remains unanswered. The war he helped start left a trail of casualties, a reshaped political landscape in Mexico, and a permanent entry in the list of history's most avoidable conflicts. If you made it this far, drop a comment below and let us know which of these wars you want us to dig into further. Subscribe so you never miss an upload. There's a lot more where this came from.